Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World episode 166. I'm your host John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at gamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm talking to Steve Wade. So Steve has had a pretty interesting career. He started out gold farming back in the days of Ultima Online. He worked on free-to-play game communities. He did some stuff around game payments. He did game M&A for investment banks. And in 2021, he decided he was going to get into blockchain gaming. So he founded a company called Midnight. And Midnight is going to be launching what it calls a multiverse called Evergreen. So the concept behind Evergreen is instead of taking some money and making one big game, they're going to take some money and they're going to make many games. So some of those games will be developed in-house, be bigger games, but some of them will be published by Midnight and they will be games from other developers. And they will be more niche products. So the idea is there's going to be a whole bunch of games, maybe as much as one new game every month. And some of those games are going to appeal to very niche audiences. Some of them will appeal to wider audiences. But the whole point is there's going to be an interoperability between all those games in terms of the assets that you can take between games. So that's the concept. We will see how it pans out. So the Evergreen mobile companion app is currently live on app stores. The first games are expected to go live in October this year. So I hope you enjoy the show. Don't forget to subscribe. Every week we are putting out new episodes about what's going on in the world of blockchain gaming. So don't miss out, and see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome to the show. Very pleased today. I've got Stephen Wade from Midnight. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me, John.
Good. Yeah, that's good. Just remarking on your interesting background there with the pictures. It's like it's very futuristic actually. It's sort of I'm a little bit jealous.
I did it just for this. Yeah.
Of course. So today we are talking, say, about Midnight. But before we get on to that, always good to find out a bit of backstory about the person who's in the podcast. So if you want to give us a bit of a sort of potted history about what you've been up to and how you got into blockchain games.
I'll keep it truncated,
Okay.
but I will start fairly far in the past. So anyone who takes a look at my Twitter, I have one message pinned, and it is the August 1997 issue of PC Gamer magazine, where this game Ultima Online kind of just attracted me. It was just there was something about it, like you could live in this fantasy world and fight dragons. And I got the game at release. I jumped into it. I got pretty good at it. Actually started joining esport tournaments and making some money playing the game. I eventually realized that esports is fun, and as much as fun as it was back in the day to like lug around massive desktops to all these esports tournaments, it was way easier just to set up a bot on my computer to farm gold in MMOs. And so that's what I had done, when I was 15 to 19, paid for university by farming gold in 26 different MMOs, 27 MMOs, and it was fantastic. I love this idea that people could pay time for money. The whole idea is like, hey, digital currency, digital real estate, because one of the funnest things that I was selling was houses, right? I would buy a house or build a house in MMO and flip it right after I added some fun decorations. And so like I've always loved this idea of like digital ownership.
Of course, we should point out back then that total grey, well even now, total grey market, totally against the Eulers. So how many accounts did get shut down? That was a constant thing.
Many accounts. Yeah. I think the final nail for me in that coffin was in 2002 when eBay shut us down. So it was fine to open up the accounts on the various MMOs because you would always make your money back. But eBay said no more gold selling, and so we had to go to these grey markets where I did run one. I had the third largest grey market in North America for a number of time. But it was difficult, right? Because people kept thinking, we're shut you down, and I'm just starting university. And at this point in time, like, okay, well, we have to figure out how do we legitimize ourselves. And we have like 75,000 members at this point in our forums, our IRC chat, ICQ chat, if you remember those ones. And it was okay. Well, let's figure out what do we have. We have a large community. What can we do with this community? And so we ended up signing Guild Wars and World of Warcraft as our first two legitimate clients. We built communities for them, and that just we kind of left the gold farming behind us. I wish I didn't, because people became billionaires at that, and we slugged it out by actually working.
You went legit, yeah.
But it ended up working well because we did pivot in 2006. We did some of the first free-to-play games in the United States with Area Games. They acquired that gold farming business of mine, and because they wanted the community, and I guess some of my expertise, which again, I think they sold that one to Gamigo a couple years later for 80 million. But I still like the digital area, the gray market. So I actually joined a company called PlaySpan. There was 3 of us in Silicon Valley. I hadn't decided to start another startup yet, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to join this one because I believe in digital items. And we raised $20 million for that. Visa acquired for 240. So it wasn't a bad exit for Menlo Ventures. But what we realized fairly early on is a pure marketplace for like just allowing Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings Online to trade items between each other, it wasn't enough to support a company, right? You still had to have games make money, and then the item sales in the back end are secondary. Now, if you had a hit, maybe like a CS:GO or something, you might be a little better off. But the 2 to 5% on transactions was just not enough. So that's why they pivot to be more financial. But I still love digital items. I thought it was a great move at the time. I think it was good for the user. And went through a couple different other game companies, always in gaming, sold a couple game studios, eventually pivoted into investment banking for about 5.5 years, closed 20 deals in investment banking, and then the last company I was working on was a Web3 project called Shrapnel, and they were doing quite well, and I was like, well, if these guys are I'm introducing them as veterans in the digital item space. I'm like, if they're veterans, I'm a dinosaur or a fossil, but I still love it, so I'm going to jump back in. And so in December of 21, we started Midnight.
Okay. Good. That's good. Covers a lot of stuff there. And I guess, I
tried.
No, it's good. There's lots of points to pick out of it. I mean, I guess it's sort of funny. I mean, not funny. It follows the thread that you're going on. That stuff like Mt. Gox came out of that gold farming community. So there's actually quite a lot of the early Bitcoin, people or blockchain people came out of that because it was effectively, what you were doing were, as I say, against the ULAs, and obviously it wasn't blockchain, it wasn't decentralized, but all the blockchain is doing is making those old style businesses, legitimate and
that's exactly right.
And proper liquidity and everything. Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it? I mean.
It makes sense to me. I think you might have some issues with the U.S. government. You can let them know. But I like where things are going.
I think a lot of the early people in the blockchain game space did come through that. They came through those sort of MMO communities where they, even though they sort of knew that this stuff shouldn't be traded in this way, sort of everyone who was serious about the games did. So it was, an interesting sort of.
Don't hold
situation.
me to this, and your viewers don't write me any letters because I don't know if it's right or not. But I had heard the Ethereum founder started Ethereum because he lost his World of Warcraft account, and I thought that was great. I don't know if it's true or not. I want to believe that it is true.
I think it is. I think he has had some debate around exactly. I think a lot of those stories are so good that they may not be 100% true, but there is some truth to the story.
That's a good. If it's not true, it ought to be. I think that's the way
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it gets told so much. Okay, so we've got a bit of backstory there, and December 2021, you decide to make your own game. So I mean, it's sort of. For people who've been in the space, you sort of get games, but I guess I don't know if you how much if you'd made a lot of games before. So obviously there's a difference in being in the space. I mean, I've been in the game space for 20 years, but I've never made a game. So I have a certain amount of knowledge about what I think are good games and how the business works and the tech and stuff. But if I had to go make a game, it'd probably be a bit of a mess. So for you, sort of deciding you're going to kind of set up and do this product Midnight, which we'll talk about, was that sort of a fairly straightforward thing, or how does that process go?
Well, it took me a good, let's say, 2 months to come up with the concept, because I wanted to think of something that was so ridiculously hard and challenging that no one would pitch it to investors, because I think what you have in the VC community, and I'm fairly public about this, so my investors are great. But for all the other investors who've never invested in Midnight, I think you have this really bad focus group because there's not enough players when you look at individual. Like if you had investors, like crowdfunding, I think is a great way to raise money. And it's one of the reasons I like Web3. But like just individual investors, if you go to a VC community, they're going to cut a lot of bad ideas.
Yeah.
But they're also going to cut a lot of good ideas. And so what you get left is like this middle mush, gray mush of gaming ideas.
Mm.
And I wanted to take something that was believable to fit into that gray mush, but also something that no one else has done. So everything that we've started building, we're either the first mover or we're a category leader already in the 2 years that we've started. So I feel pretty good that we identified what the problems were, and we're starting to see that now. So if you were at GDC, if you saw a lot of things coming out of GDC, AAA games have been dying for a while. Free to play is difficult, especially on mobile. And what is becoming a trend, which is we've been pitching for the last 2 years, is small premium titles, AA games that cost anywhere from 1 to say 10 million in budget. What has, I think, got exciting this year at GDC, because 2 games come out that have done quite well, that move some eyeballs, Pal Worlds and Helldivers. And that's the space that we've been building games in for the last 2 years. So we feel pretty good about that. The goal for us is to get a game out a month, and you can't do that if you're doing AAA or with Cyberpunk.
Let's just interrupt you there a little bit. I mean, one game a month? I mean, I guess it sort of depends, I suppose, how parallel your process is. So if you had 50 teams and you were sort of like one's going to start and 3 years later they're going to release one, and then, but obviously that's an enormous amount of money. You're sort of replicating the AAA problem just by having it.
It's exactly right. We're still spending AAA dollars just across multiple teams.
So, but still, one game a month seems like a pretty tough sort of cadence.
It's not something we can start with, right? So like before we get to that, it's probably a 3-year roll-up.
Okay.
Or ramp up to one game a month. So we'll probably do games in season, a couple of games every quarter until we can get to that one game a month. But it's happening now with Web 2 games. Like Team 17, right? They did 26 games last year. I think Curve Digital did like 16.
So,
publish them, yeah. So we will. We're looking for what I would call first to second party titles for one game a month, and we will do third party publishing. The way I look at first and second, they're your experiences. And so like they're more integrated into the overall story, and then the third party games will be rides. They're still part of the story, but they're not as in depth. But one thing unique to Midnight is every game is their own walled garden. Like every game should be able to stand on its own. Every game should be profitable on its own. The benefit that we look at with our kind of evergreen deconstructed MMO is most AA games, most premium games, they have a 3 to 6 month lifespan. We believe our model, we're going to increase that to 9 to 12 months, but still games die. Every once in a while you get a game that's evergreen that lasts for no pun intended 2, 3, 10 years, and look, we're not going to run away from those. We'll chase success, but we came into this fully knowing that games will die. Games are it's a hard business to start a game and to make money on a game. To get eyeballs for a game, discoverability is still a massive issue that not very many people have figured out how to solve yet, if anyone. And so we like a challenge.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. You're sort of having a maybe universe isn't the right word. I don't know what word you would have, but basically, let's say you got a universe where there's sort of a core sort of thesis, and then there are games that will sort of come into that. Some will be more specifically sort of coupled, and some will be sort of more diverse. But the whole point is that all of them will somehow be part of the whole. Is that sort of correct?
That's right. I use the term multiverse just because I like the way the Midnight multiverse sounds.
Okay.
I don't like metaverses, but I like multiverses. But that's exactly right. So it's ideally a game a month. We wanted to figure out how could we lean into Web3? How could we actually bring utility items? How could we create a marketplace between games? And my background in selling items in various MMOs and having the trading platform, like we saw, like the amount of users actually trading is fairly small, right? You have a subset of a subset of users that actually want to trade. I think that subset can be increased if it's forefront and it's not in a great market, but I don't think it's enough to support game studios. So you still have to have a business. You still have to have a game business. And what we liked about doing multiple games instead of focusing on one game is now it becomes a hardship if you don't play every single game. You're more willing to spend money in your primary game, and I think we're one of the only Web3 studios that has Deloitte on our white paper, because we did this kind of research with them. And one of the things we found is we talked about discoverability is an issue, but once a user has a game, they stay. Like if they're playing Fortnite, they're going to stay in Fortnite for a while, and you probably don't want to move them out of Fortnite and take away cash from where they're putting money. So we would like to keep users in the game that they're playing. But say that they want a black T-shirt, but the only way to get that black T-shirt is by playing Back Black Fishing Pros, and they don't like fishing games. Well, now people love playing fishing games. They have these black T-shirts that they can sell to people in another game that has utility in that game that they want. And so that was kind of the basis of what we were thinking. Is like, well, what can we build? How do we make a circular ecosystem for games that matter versus like, here's a Ponzi scam. Okay, this item's going to go up in value is when you buy it. And I guess that's rarely the case, right?
So, I guess the tricky bit in these sort of situations is the sort of the ties that bind the thing together. So I guess you don't want to have it too tight because you want people to have freedom. The game makers have a certain amount of freedom, but you want it to be sort of tight enough that there is interoperability. So what's your thinking around that? Would it be that every item in every game would have interoperability, or?
Oh no.
So, but there needs to be. You can't just have a game that just doesn't have any maybe brilliant creative game, but if it has no interoperability, then there's no point in it being in the platform, I presume.
So our interoperability is I think it's a fairly neat system. We call our interoperable item keys.
Okay.
So that's why you'll see the Evergreen logo as a keyhole. Keys for us are very much like Game Sharks of the past, right? They're game mods, right? So obviously we love what Overwolf does with game mods and changing mods. They're investors, so I have to say that. But we love the idea, like you can change things. And this is one of the things that we think is going to let our games go past those 3 to 6 months. Is at some point users can come in and bring their mods and change the game. But we have a very it's a large period of interoperability, but like the base level, what we call semantic interoperability, is just a simple tag system where a game developer can come in and say, look, this is like a farming rate to achieve this item. This item is blue, so I have a blue tag on it. Maybe it makes things fast. I have a fast tag on it, and then other game developers can see those lists of I think our first 42 tags, and they say, okay, well, I like strength, or I like speed, or I like the color blue, so let's bring that in. And it's maybe it unlocks quest, maybe it's cosmetics. IP holders seem to like this because if you go and you're licensing Shrek, you can't license Shrek and take Shrek to every single game that you ever create. But if it's like, well, if you go to the IP holder and say, well, I want Shrek, but he's only going to be in 2 games. Here's a Shrek item. If someone destroys this, because we have the crafting system, well, then they get all the parts that make up Shrek: green, strength, whatever smells bad from the swamp. Take your pick. But then they can move around the games. And IP holders like that, the developer teams seem to like it because it's fairly light lift, and we're not asking them to change their game. We're just asking them to look inside of our drop-down menu for that, and that's the rides. I think the experiences, they're a little more in depth. We have a companion app that links everything together. So there is a overall story that kind of moves forward, but the story is secondary to the first game. So a user, I think we're saying 75% of users are going to play the single-player game or multiplayer game, but just that game, and they're not going to care about the secondary market of item sales or the secondary story that is Evergreen. I think they're just like, hey, I like 2D pixel brawlers, or I like fishing games, or I like Barbie dress-up games. They're going to come, they're going to play that game. We're making niche games for niche users, and I think it's fun because eventually, that 30-some% will have to intermingle. And I think that's always been fun about MMOs for me, is like you get people interacting with each other that normally wouldn't.
So, in terms of the sort of structure, I mean, you mentioned MMOs there, and I guess MMOs are sort of interesting in the sense that you have lots of different game types within an MMO, and and obviously the MMO sort of has that, is a single sort of experience that's sort of tightly balanced into this one developer generally creates it, but there's lots of different ways you can play it. Whereas you sort of expanded that out, and I just sort of wonder, when you're talking about some of those niche games, it seems hard to think that will you end up creating a lot of quite niche games and then they will potentially find an audience, but then is there enough there to draw them back into sort of the central hub? Because I guess you need, the way you're talking, that you need the experiences and the rides to sort of be in some sort of balance, and you don't, maybe you want more people in the experiences because that's sort of there tend to be maybe a bit more sticky. And I just kind of wonder, I mean, obviously you don't know this because the thing's not live yet, but I sort of wonder how the gearing changes over time and how you try and... I guess you want to move people to the most engaged, profitable bit of your business?
I think, what water always finds the path of least
Yeah.
resistance. So I think we're gonna, as we build games, we're gonna figure out what that is and
Mm.
how to support users the best way we can. But when we looked at this, we looked at these different Web3 companies building metaverse was essentially empty shopping malls, and I think it's very
Mm.
difficult to build an MMO,
Mm.
and it's 3+ years, $100 million, whereas a double A game it's less than a year sometimes, a couple hundred grand, maybe up 5 million on the big ones, a couple years, but like MMOs are just like even more than
Mm.
double A games. Like MMOs are that's the money sink, right?
Okay.
On the flip side, an MMO can return an entire fund's investment, right? A successful MMO is just
Mm.
they're massive, and so we like the looking for the upside of the MMO without the downside of the development, and that's how we kind of came to
Okay.
the deconstructed bit.
Mm. Mm.
Um, we and as we've been working through the years, what we actually ended up finding was it was better that we've done this because as a single MMO, one game that you install, there is a finite amount of users for that MMO, and it's actually kind of difficult to find new users to bring into MMOs, right? That's why they
Yeah.
all was it Phil Spencer you mentioned for Xbox, right? There's only so many Xbox users, and they're all being shared across games. So what
Mm.
we actually liked about the deconstructed concept is we have these niche games for niche users. It actually widens the top funnel to getting people
Okay.
down to the
Mm-hmm.
other. So that's we've developed a term now saying there's something for everybody, right? At midnight, there's some kind of
Mm.
game, and our goal is not to get everyone to play every game.
Mm.
Ideally, we have 12 games coming a year. A user might like 2, 3, maybe 4 of those games max. We don't expect them to
Mm.
play all of the games. But it does, help us get down to that lower funnel where the Evergreen app, that's, it's a free to play game by itself. We actually embrace bots. If you don't own a game, you can actually
Okay.
send bots from your app to go farm another game. So
Okay.
I fought bots for MMOs for so long. We just
Yeah.
embraced it fully here. Obviously, you get better rewards if you own the game. You get different followers and stuff. But
Mm.
yeah, it's you're exactly right. It's going to take a while to get them down. We bought this studio in San Francisco called Square 2, and they
Mm-hmm.
were big on hyper casual games. They had all their
Okay.
games linked together. They had
Mm.
this shared wallet, and they were doing play to earn before it was cool. And I liked their looking at their tech, and they had I think 7 games. But if one person was playing one game, the D30 retention was fairly low. But if they played two, then it was quite high.
Yeah.
If they played four, it's quite high. Like if they were at four, they stuck around for like a couple years. So I was like, oh, that's
Okay.
that's that's where you want to get them. And we saw
Mm.
something similar when we were doing publishing portals at Area Games, or even the gray markets. Like if they had their main game, and you can give them something offer, they'll come back to the MMO, but maybe they play a racing game for a month or something, just something to wet
Yeah.
their whistle. But they stay inside your ecosystem, then
Yeah.
that's great, right? The cost for
Mm.
user acquisition is much lower.
Okay.
So that's it's kind of rolling around our mind what we're trying to build. It's like niche games for niche users. We'll get a bunch of them, right? Maybe one game only has a TAM of 100 million, but then you get 10 of those, then you have a
Mm.
$1 billion kind of product for 10 games. So that's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to push, I think, the Web3 or the part where they're
No.
they're in the app, because I think there's going to be certain times when you message users. It should never feel like forced.
No.
Um, but I think for the most part, we're only offering. I only see it as benefits as someone who went to college for selling gold, having some
Yeah.
kind of participation in an ecosystem that I spend my time. I think that's an upside.
Mm. So you, it sounds like you're definitely this is something where the blockchain is very much in the background, and if the blockchain isn't strong enough, I guess you think at the moment, for it to be an incentive to bring more users in, it's just going to be a frictional thing where people go, "What is? I don't understand this." Is that sort of
That's
currently where
exactly
you are?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we went through. We have a list, actually, kind of like in the spirit of basketball. I'm not a big basketball. Like, this March Madness bracket of all the different gaming chains,
Yeah.
and we went through all of them. We're probably going to announce our chain in the next, say, 2 weeks.
Okay.
But the one I'd always go to all of them because they're offering cash, or
Mm.
they have a bunch of tools, particularly tools that I don't need as a a stored game developer. Um, so I'd always go to it, was like, hey, can you give me users? And
Mm.
really, the only chain is offer users is Ronin, right? Because they've
Yeah.
got all the Axie Infinity guys. So I was like, okay, well, there's only one chain offer users. What can anyone offer me? Cash is cash, right? So then it's
Mm.
like just kind of what's the better deal terms, right? How long am I locked into this userless system? Because content is king and distribution wears the pants in gaming. That doesn't change because of blockchain. There's a
Mm.
finite amount of blockchain users, and we're making games for real games. That being said, I do like the Avalanche guys. I think that
Yeah.
they're building great products on their subnets with MapleStory and Shrapnel. Monad is coming into gaming, and they've built a wonderful community around their Purple Pepe, which is just weird, but great at the same time. Yeah. There's a couple other ones we've looked at, and Aptos. I think Aptos and Sui, they're completely different, and I think you have to scratch your head looking at them. But I think for crafting, they're both pretty interesting. Yeah.
And in terms of sort of where are you at the moment in terms of sort of product and how many sort of how many games you're sort of doing yourself, and where the sort of publishing sort of arm of it all is?
So we have 4 games in development. 2 are original IPs that I came up with. 2 are IPs that we're licensing, and then we're looking at buying a company. So I think traditional Web 2 is in trouble. A lot of studios are shutting down. I was an M&A investment banker, so I was special circumstances. So I wasn't coming into companies when everything was great. It was like, hey, things are going bad. How do we save this? And so that's what I'm looking at now. I'm looking at these studios, like, who can we bring in? They've had portfolio games. So we've got 2 offers out right now for 5 to 6 additional games, so we can have a strong portfolio ourselves. These games I'll tell you the one that I missed because someone else bought it, and I found out that they bought it for like less than 10% what I offered. But it was a game called Awesome Knots. 30,000 Steam reviews, very positive game. And I was like, oh, I should have got that. And so we're looking at games that people like already to add to the portfolio, or we're looking at games that are, let's say, unfinished. They're maybe 6 months away from development. And so we're looking at publishing deals, we're looking at studio acquisitions. We're happy to look at team acquisitions. There's, with all these layoffs, I've got to assume there's a team of 5 coming out of, Riot or Bungie or some other unknown studio that can knock something out, especially with, AI and all these tools. Like we look at a new AI tool every day. I'm just amazed by like the speed, and it's going to make some massive changes in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And in terms of, obviously you're sort of well established in the industry on the sort of the funding side. You've even so, it's still quite expensive, and I guess maybe now's the sort of opportunity where you go, well, the situation's so good, if we can go and raise some more money now, we can just really accelerate against our roadmap. But equally, then you have to go to investors. And I get the impression that a lot of investors in the crypto investors are obviously going into everything because they just love new tokens and
it's wild for crypto,
yeah. But in terms of the more sort of serious sort of traditional VCs, I still think blockchain they sort of got maybe not their fingers burnt, but they sort of the 2022 era sort of, I think, put them off a little bit. So I don't think they're back yet, but you would know more than
I think you're exactly right. I think as someone who's been in game for 20 years, you've seen the cycles, right? And so Web3 was a cycle 2 years ago. Last year was AI. This year was this is just the cycle of anxiety where everyone's kind of doesn't know what the future is. So I think they're being cautious. But I see there was 2 types of investors that I spoke with at GDC. There was the more senior guys. They're on their 5th or 7th fund, and they're just asking me like, Steve, who's LPs? I'm trying to raise my 8th fund, right? And so they're it's even hard for them to raise capital. And then there's what I would call the younger VCs, and they're like, how do you evaluate premium games? How do you go off Twitter followers? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's like, you just do what the other guys did. Just give money to your friends, and then you'll be fine. And it's funny to see how that's playing out. But I would say, gaming itself has always been challenging for investing. And I in those two of those companies that we shut down, Tryon Worlds and Gazillion. So those are 2 companies that raised close to $1 billion that returned nothing to investors. Yet they had Tryon had multiple games that threw off a lot of cash. And I believe had there been a token involved, investors would have been not even made whole, but seen a profit. And so now if you look at Web3, there's companies that are hitting 3 billion valuations. They don't even have a product, and I think that's probably going to change in the future. But imagine some of these Web3 companies that have revenue, have an actual game, actual users, and the token can be valuable for longer than one bull run. I think that's going to be the future for a lot of game investment. Well, live service games where tokens make sense. I don't think everyone can add a token, but I think that's going to be a lot more interesting.
Okay, and certainly for the sort of the approach you're doing, I mean, nothing sort of impossible, but having a blockchain is fairly inherently fundamental to what you're trying to do. I mean, it doesn't really make sense otherwise.
Yeah, and I actually think what we're doing is more interesting to blockchains because we're working with a bunch of different studios. We have to have a shared database to get everyone talking.
Yeah.
Like something like a Roblox or a Fortnite really don't need a blockchain, right? They're their own walled ecosystem, but we're linking multiple games, multiple developers, hopefully across chains, at some point.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that makes sense. I think we are actually found a use case for it that is this is not like, hey, we're trying to find a problem, but we're like, there is a problem. This legitimately solves that problem. Let's use it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I might be a bit more sort of not investigative journalist, but a bit more sort of trying to put you on the spot a little bit. I guess what we've seen up to this point is a lot of people in the blockchain game sector have come up with a very specific product that they want to do, and that is a sort of a game and a vision, and how they're going to put blockchain in there. And I guess maybe a criticism of what you're doing is you've sort of come up with a business model, and I guess the question would be: are any of those products, even with your sort of your slate approach to doing it, are any of those going to be sort of good enough to compete against whatever? Say for one, you mentioned it, a Shrapnel, which is a very high quality sort of shooter product. The guys know what they're doing. It's a very specific vision. If you're not, I played it and I'm terrible at it. I just die all the time. But that's that will definitely appeal to a certain group of people because you'll know that's their vision. Whereas this could be, this sounds really super interesting. I can see why it's going to work from a business point of view. But does the product actually sort of bring people in? I mean, I guess that would be one high level sort of discussion.
Well, I like that because I think that's a compliment actually. Because the way that we looked at it was even when Shrapnel was raising, every month or every hour there was probably a new Web3 project that, hey, this is a new way to do this. And I sat down, like when we were coming to this concept, I was like, instead of thinking where blockchain is going to be in the next 5 years, let's look at the last 5 years. Let's build a business model out of like what we know has been around for 5 years already and what's going to continue to be around for the next 5 years. And then if we have sustainable revenue, because cash is king, especially after a bull and a bear, a lot of people couldn't raise funding to shut down. As long as we have a revenue source, we can do things, and we want to be very excited about what we're doing, right? So we're making real games that people can have fun with, and from taking that approach, now we can do fun things at Web3, where Web3 is not our business model, where it's not required to keep the studio's lights on, and then in that model we hope to find the next Shrapnel or the next some game, because hits still make moves in the game industry. I don't think anyone can deny that. Even when we're doing 12 games a year, we expect those games to do 1, 2, or 3x return. Like we're not looking for a blockbuster or a hit. I think a hit internally we say 1 in 30 games we have a chance of getting a hit. 1 in 100 games we have a chance of a blockbuster. So we're very conservative in our model.
Okay. And sort of where are you now in terms of what can you say about sort of roadmap and when sort of stuff comes out? So
I mentioned we're going to announce our chain partner in the next 2 weeks. I think we're down to the final 4 in that bracket that I mentioned, and so we're just kind of going through those last names and figuring out which one tech's going to make sense, which community is going to make sense. And ideally, it's a cross-chain community. So even if we pick one of the 4 and we leave the other 3, we can still do things with those other 3. That's the end goal, right? We have our mobile companion app, that we launched the alpha. It's on iOS. People can download it now. They can start farming for NFTs and our airdrops. Android, I'm told, will be any day now. And I keep going back to the team, and who are mostly in San Francisco, and I said, why did we do iOS first instead of Android? And then, we're at the San Francisco conference shop, they're all looking down at their iPhones, and like, what? Oh, sorry. And so I'm like, okay, well, that answers that question. So those will be up. We plan, the plan was to do a TGU on April 1st. Didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I thought, that's a perfect day for a TGE, but because we didn't have a chain partner, it made it difficult. So we're looking at June at this point. We're lining up with exchanges. Exchanges are incredibly busy. There is something like 60 game tokens coming out this summer. Everything's everyone's bullish. Everyone sees tokens as a way to, well, for me, it's just another asset class. It's a way for me to make more games, right? Whether it's token or maybe I'll do a SPAC, like whatever cash gets endorsed, I can make games. But a lot of these, and I've seen so many, that brilliant marketing, just like genius level marketing, but like no fundamental understanding of how the game industry works. And I'm like, how does this a $500 million or $1 billion token project when they have no one person in the gaming team? And so, enough cash and time, I think people can execute anything. But I think there's a few companies, myself, Shrapnel, I'll name some others in the comments, but I think they're real game companies. I think they have a real team, but I'm always amazed at just like little name studios that just pop up and they're super successful. I think back to the VCs, like they always want to, like, hey, this was the next Blizzard or next Riot or something, but the truth is, like, those teams don't really produce the results that you would hope they would. Right? They might have a good game that's fun, but it's not the next hit, right?
No. I mean, I think that's always the one, and I think it's because it's a byproduct of the enthusiasm people have, which you can also cut as the inexperience of people in the sector and looking for the next game. Is there's this great team come out of Riot, and it was basically it's the marketing team from some subdivision of Riot subsidiary. There's a famous one, I won't go into it, but it was like this is the Supercell founding team, and it was like, I mean, it just blatantly sort of wasn't. But I think you're right. People should have their opportunity, but it is a weird time, I think, where there's so much sort of launch liquidity for tokens in the market, but then you suddenly, after a few months, it becomes very clear if there is any sort of substance to these sort of tokens. So I guess that's what we'll see over the next 6 months.
That's exactly right. I was chatting with someone. I was like, I think investors aren't going to be investing as many projects, but I think they are. I think there's going to be a lot more rug pulls in 6 months.
Yes,
and then I'm like, okay, cool. Well,
good. And so for people, they should go and find the mobile app. Obviously, I guess you have the usual sort of Twitter, X, Discord, all the usual stuff.
That's right. Yeah. We're the Twitter is or X, sorry. It's just Play Evergreen. So the company's called Midnight. The product's called Evergreen. It's confusing sometimes.
Yes.
But yeah.
Cool.
It's, I don't know. We're excited. I think it's fun. We've just started doing marketing in the last 2 months. We turned our Discord on. 10,000 people joined in like the first 48 hours. I'm like, oh shit, that's a lot of people. And our community person, she's like, I don't know if I can handle this. And I'm like, well, we'll find some other people. So they hired an intern. And but yeah, Twitter's growing. I think if we were a Web 2 game company and I were looking through socials, like, oh, that's good, but these socials don't transition into game sales, right? That's just where Web 2 is. But on Web 3, these socials, they change. It's liquidity in the token or the NFT, and it's definitely different. It's been fun. It's been like getting my head around, like, product and token are very different, right? Utility to the product is great, but like people are still there for other reasons than just playing a game.
And for your, as much as you can say, what's your sort of hope when will be the first time we'll be able to play?
So the PC console games, we're looking at October right now.
Okay, so
the first couple
fairly.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that far away at all. Love it.
That's kind of scary.
Well, as a first introduction to what you're up to, that's great. Maybe we can come back later on in the year and see how things have
we'll either be super happy or like, oh, everything on fire.
Yeah. Yes, cool. Good. Thanks to Steve for his time, and thanks to you for watching, listening to the podcast, however you are consuming it. Don't forget to subscribe. Every week we're putting out new episodes. The market is really fascinating at the moment. There's lots of stuff happening, lots of launches happening, so keep up to date, don't miss out. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.